Hey there, Heather Holler. It's Jeff Cutter Dunn. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 football video. And today we're looking at the top 10 quarterback controversies of all time. And yes, the guy on my shoulders, number 12, will definitely be in one of them because, come on, you really think it? There one? One? So, anyway, we have 10 great quarterback controversies of all time. Of course, quarterback is the main focus of a NFL team. Here we go. Number 10 is Mark Sanchez versus Tim Tebow of the New York Jets. So Mark Sanchez was drafted from USC by the Jets, who were looking for a good starting quarterback, and they got him. Sanchez actually helped the Jets get to back-to-back AFC title games, including being the Pats in the divisional round in 2011, pissing me off in the process. Of course, you know me. But the fact of the matter is that Sanchez could not win the big one to get to the Jets to the Super Bowl. Despite all that, the Jets decided to do something stupid and they decided to trade for Tim Tebow. Tebow was the Denver starting quarterback. Denver drafted him late in the first round and he helped Denver out in overtime, 3-0 in the regular season, and that overtime win against Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and then the Tebowing, that standard thing. It was just shocking, but yeah, Tebow came to be at the Jets. Fans wanted him to be the starting quarterback, but they went with Mark Sanchez a lot. They didn't go with Tim Tebow as much, which was stupid because Tebow was decent for the Jets, especially with Mark Sanchez being hit with the butt fumble and all that. But unfortunately, that did not work too well. Number 9 is Colin Kaepernick versus Alex Smith. This was a giant one because of the fact that, Alex Smith was picked first overall by the San Francisco 49ers in 2005 from the University of Utah. And he was doing okay. The Niners were doing decently. They just couldn't go over the hump like they wanted to. And then, of course, San Fran had problems. There was an injury to Alex Smith, and Colin Kaepernick, who was drafted from the University of Nevada by the Niners, stepped in and did his job. Kaepernick did such a good job of his running and passing that the Niners decided to say screw you, Alex Smith, and traded him to Kansas City, he would be the main starting quarterback before Patrick Mahomes came in to play. But yeah, Alex Smith was traded. There was a lot of debate, and the fact was that Colin Kaepernick was a decent quarterback, but then unfortunately for some people, not for me, he actually went to his activism and all that. I applaud Colin Kaepernick's activism, no matter what you think, because he did his job, so he did what he had to do. Number 8 is Jay Cutler versus Kyle Orton of the Denver Broncos. So the Broncos, as I said in my last football video, had done back-to-back choke jobs of the division in 08 and 09. Josh McDaniels, when he came to be the Denver quarterback, decided to get rid of Jay Cutler for Kyle Orton, despite the fact that Jay Cutler was immortalized in a South Park episode about Guitar Hero, which Stan says something about Jay Cutler, but he just shrugs it off. But yeah, the Broncos wanted Kyle Orton to be the starting quarterback, so they got rid of Jay Cutler, who was throwing for 4,000 plus yards, and he was pretty good. The Bears got Cutler for Orton because Kyle Orton used to be a Bear. Cutler went to Chicago, helped the Bears to a couple of NFC title game appearances, and Kyle Orton was just nothing. Except for that nice pass to Brendan Stokely, that one game won against the Broncos and the Bengals, and making Gus Johnson go nuts. But anyway, it was years of quarterback instability for the Broncos until Peyton Manning came in because the Colts got rid of him. Plain stupid. And all that. This will be big, but I'm going to make this number 7. Number 7 is Dak Prescott versus Tony Romo of the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys had some great quarterbacks. Troy Aikman came in the 89 draft. He wasn't good at first, but little by little, he helped the Cowboys win 2 straight Super Bowls and winning a third one in 96. And then, of course, he got injured and had to retire. the Cowboys needed someone, so they had Drew Bledsoe, but he was worthless in a sense. Tony Romo coming from the University of Eastern Illinois. Like, what do you think about when you think Eastern Illinois? Nobody, not even in baseball. But yeah, Tony Romo did his job. Yeah, in his rookie campaign, he did have that terrible snap that ruined Dallas's game against Seattle in the wild card round. But the fact of the matter was that Romo was starting to pick up the pieces and became a very serviceable player and all that, especially in 2008, 708, leading Cowboys to a 13-3 mark, number one seed in the NFC, but choking to the Giants in the playoffs. But Romo was decent, and then by 2016, he injured himself. So Dak Prescott, drafted from Mississippi State, being the best Mississippi State quarterback since Jackie Parker, Prescott did his job, and he helped the Dallas fans realize they can move on from Romo. Romo never regained his starting position. There was heated debates. Romo played a few years as backup, and then he became one of the NFL's highly touted color commentators, working with Jim Nantz on CBS. So that's what happened. Number 6 is Donovan McNabb versus Michael Vick. Now, this was huge. Philadelphia didn't even want Donovan McNabb, or at least the fans didn't want him. The stacked 99 draft, that's how Tim Couch go first overall to Cleveland from the University of Kentucky. Philly had the number 2 pick, and everyone wanted Ricky Williams because, he was a great running back in college for the University of Texas. But Philly shocked everyone by going with Donovan McNabb, this quarterback from Syracuse. Syracuse had a good season in '98, but the fans would have none of it. Boo! Fuck you! And all that. The Eagles fans just are as bad as they are. Remember, they booed Santa Claus and pelted him with snowballs in 1968. So anyway, the Eagles had a problem. But Donovan McNabb basically shut those fans up. Despite 3 straight NFC title game losses, I mean, they made it there. And in 2005, they made the Super Bowl. Donovan McNabb was rolling around, and then Michael Vick, fresh off his prison sentence and somehow being allowed to be reinstated to the NFL, was made to be the starter and all that. The locker room was divided. There was a lot of media scrutiny to the Eagles why they signed Michael Vick in the first place. I mean, you have Donovan McNabb. I mean, you have 2 great black quarterbacks, great and all that, but Michael Vick, everyone thought he was washed up after his jail sentence. Although he said that he was happy that trip to Kansas helped him out because it made him a better person. People just don't agree with him. Number 6 is a old school. Yeah, no, sorry, number 5. Sorry, number 5 is an old school battle royal. It's Norman Brocklin versus Bob Waterfield for the LA Rams. I know you could also say that the whole Craig Morton, Roger Staubach quarterback controversy in Dallas in the early 70s when Morton was the starter, and then Staubach came from Navy in his 2-year uh, military stint, which he had to do because before 1995, any athlete drafted in pro sports from Army or Navy had to do a 2-year commitment. It explains why David Robinson, after he was drafted first overall, well, he was drafted first overall in 1987 by the Spurs. James Brown, not the singer, but the CBS guy, interviewed the San Antonio owner and said, David Robinson, you want to draft him, and then the naval commitment. Do you have a problem with that? And he goes, we waited 14 years for this number 1 pick. What's 2 more? So he was willing to hold onto it. But nevertheless, that was a good controversy, but that didn't make the cut. For me, the old school one is Norman Brocklin's Bob Waterfield. And you'd be thinking, are you nuts? Maybe I am. Nevertheless, in the 1950s, the LA Rams had an offensive circus, kind of like the Cleveland Browns did, and all that. They were throwing for a lot of yardage, touchdowns, and the Rams did win a few NFL titles pre Super Bowl era. Norman Brocklin was this no nonsense quarterback from the University of Oregon. Bob Waterfield was this polished hometown hero from the University of California, Los Angeles, or UCLA for short, of course. They're in Los Angeles. They're in Tinseltown. Bob Waterfield was actually married to Jane Mansfield, a Hollywood starlet, for many years. So anyway, that was huge. Van Brocklin and Waterfield, that their job and all that. It was hard pressed who would lead the Rams in the direction. I mean, Waterfield, the local boy, or Van Brocklin, the guy who could throw over 500 yards a game. They went with Waterfield technically in the end, then Van Brocklin left to play for the Eagles and got them the title in 1960. So, yeah, that was big for Tinseltown. Now we're going to some huge territory. Number 4 is Philip Rivers versus Drew Brees for the San Diego Padres. I knew I would say that. Chargers. So, anyway, the San Diego Chargers had Drew Brees, a guy from the University of Purdue, drafted decently. Purdue looked pretty good. Best quarterback from Purdue since Bob Greasy. Brees was doing quite well for himself and doing okay. And then the Chargers were involved in a massive problem. They had the number 1 pick in 2004. They were going to take a quarterback. Brees was not doing it for them. So they decided to go for Eli Manning from the University of Mississippi. One problem: Eli refused to play for San Diego and basically used bargaining chips, including his father, Archie, to say, I'm not going to San Diego. So he would threaten to walk away. However, the Giants were interested in Eli and figured, well, we'll put him in New York, or New Jersey, of course, technically. So they traded their pick, their quarterback draft pick, a guy from NC State by the name of Philip Rivers. So Rivers went to San Diego, Eli went to the Giants. It was actually a gigantic one, and I think the best win-win trade in NFL history. The Giants got Eli 2 Super Bowl titles. He didn't really have the best regular season marks, but it didn't matter. He had 2 Super Bowls, and both against my Pats. Fuck. Of course, Philip Rivers, it worked out. He worked with the Chargers system. He was there for God knows how many years. And then, of course, he came out of retirement for the Colts for a few games, but he's going to go back to retirement, hopefully for good. Tom Brady's probably going to come back for retirement. I don't know. I hope not. Anyway, yeah, Philip Rivers does that. Rivers was so good that the Chargers were like, screw it, we're not going to take Drew Brees. Drew Brees can float wherever he wants. So Brees was released. Miami almost took Drew Brees, but were scared by his knee injuries, so they said no. And New Orleans, coming back from Hurricane Katrina in a sense, that almost sent the team to San Antonio, took Drew Brees. Big move by New Orleans and big bullshit job by Miami. Drew Brees was the face of New Orleans, leading them to the Super Bowl in 2010, which was kind of well deserved because of the city of New Orleans finally coming out of Hurricane Katrina's path. All that. Yeah, Drew Brees is an icon. And Philip Rivers was Chargers royalty until Justin Herbert came in. Anyway, number 3 is Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, or the Packers. The Packers were big. Brett Favre was a no name quarterback that the Packers picked up for a first round draft pick, trading their first round pick to the Atlanta Falcons. Favre could not work under Atlanta's system. He was his own worst enemy in a sense in Atlanta, and Jerry Glanville knew that. But Favre came off the bench for an injured Don Magic Man Makowski in a game against the Cincinnati Bengals, ripped a late touchdown, and then beat Pittsburgh in his first start, and it started history personified for Brett Favre, over 260 consecutive starts. The Packers had so many backup quarterbacks trying to beat him, with people like Tim Couch, Kelly Holcomb, Ty Detmer, and one Kurt Warner almost was the main guy in Green Bay to be the backup, but no, he wasn't. Brett Favre had outlasted them all. Number 4 on his chest and helping out. However, his career was running to an end. Injuries were going to take its toll eventually. The Packers in the first round decided, after seeing Aaron Rodgers, University of California quarterback, not being picked by many teams, decided to take a gamble. We're taking him, and to basically be Favre's backup and learn the game from Favre and all that. Unfortunately, though, Aaron Rodgers had the emergence, whereas many backup quarterbacks in Green Bay, including Detmer and Warner, were just nothing. So, Favre was never threatened. Of course, Aaron Rodgers was emerging, and they wanted him through. So Favre's career ended. He decided to retire, and then a few months later, he decided to turn tail and go back to the NFL, playing for the Jets instead of the Vikings. The Vikings had problems. Well, the Jets picked him up, and it almost worked. Brett Favre was helping the Jets out through the 2008 season, and it helped that Tom Brady was injured too. But the fact of the matter was that Favre got injured, didn't tell anyone, and then just kept playing. And then the Jets kept crapping the bed, and then lost to the Dolphins on the final day of the season. And the former Jets quarterback, who was sent away from New York for Brett Favre, won. Chad Pennington. Favre would end up going to Minnesota for a few years and basically screw the Vikings out of an NFC title by throwing his macho interception, which was supposed to be a good run, and then it would have been a game-ending field goal attempt. Aaron Rodgers would do well for Green Bay, and then he found his time was short after Jordan Love was drafted by Utah State, and now he's played for the Jets and now the Steelers. He's in the 2025 playoffs. So anyway, number two, speaking of Tom Brady, that's his controversy with Drew Bledsoe. Drew Bledsoe was picked second overall by the New England Patriots. No, sorry, first overall by the New England Patriots in the 93 draft. And Seattle took Rick Meyer, quarterback from Notre Dame. And it almost worked. Meyer was actually better than Bledsoe in his first season, but Meyer started slipping into oblivion, whereas Drew Bledsoe basically was one of the best around, and the former Wazoo quarterback, Washington State. And Bledsoe was huge. He had all those completions and attempts in that one game, 45 for 70 against the Vikings in overtime, over 400 yards. He was big. He helped the Pats win a Super Bowl chance in 1997, lost to the Packers, but still, he was good. He was unopposed. Unfortunately, though, the sixth round pick, the skinny guy from Michigan, even though he had a great collegiate career with Michigan, was not thought of well. And he was drafted in the sixth round, and he came up to be the backup. One Mo Lewis hit later in the 2001 season, poof, Bledsoe out Brady, and somehow Brady helped the Pats win the division. And of course, Brady was the starting quarterback when the Pats played the Raiders in the divisional round, and that game, of course, saw the tuck rule be introduced to the lexicon. So anyhow, Bledsoe wanted his job back. He did get a chance because Brady injured himself in the AFC title game in Pittsburgh. Bledsoe came back and helped the Pats beat the Steelers to face the Rams in the Super Bowl. But Tom Brady was made quarterback, and Bledsoe didn't let it bother him. He helped Tom Brady out to have his Super Bowl jitters, and the Pats won. Bledsoe would quietly decide, I can't do this, and decided to go to Buffalo and Dallas, fucking up in both places. And of course, Tom Brady, Tom Terrific. How were we supposed to know he was going to be the best quarterback around? But it may be the guy at the number one quarterback controversy. His name, Joe Montana, again, and his thing was for Steve Young. Joe Montana was his third round quarterback that nobody wanted. San Francisco picked him up because they were tired of Steve DeBerg crubbing the bed. And, the Niners were a terrible team. So, in essence, the Niners needed a quarterback to get them up over the John Brody hump. They tried Jim Plunkett, but failed miserably. So anyway, Joe Montana was big. In his rookie campaign, he helped the Niners beat the New Orleans Saints in a famous comeback, which started Montana Magic. And he helped the Niners win the Super Bowl 19. But strangely enough, the next season in 1986, at the draft, the Niners made a trade with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, getting a quarterback by the name of Steve Young. People forget that Steve Young didn't start his career as a San Francisco 49er. While he was a USFL legend, then he went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes, he was a Tampa Bay Buccaneers player, Steve Young was. Tampa traded him to San Francisco for draft picks and, Montana Young. So basically, Montana kind of figured that Steve Young was only brought by Bill Walsh to keep an eye on him. So Montana was not too pleased. But Steve Young did do some fantastic jobs within doing his quarterback stuff. Steve Young actually had a famous touchdown run against the Minnesota Vikings in the 1988 season, which is pretty good. Steve Young kept himself grounded. He did get a couple of Super Bowl rings as the backup to Joe Montana. But when Montana injured himself in the 1991 NFC title game against the New York Giants. That was the beginning of the end. Montana would only play the final Monday Night Football game in 1992 and then basically be booed out of San Francisco because Steve Young could do the job. Well, Joe Montana wanted a new team, and Kansas City opened up for him. He worked his magic with them, especially in the 93-94 playoffs, as he helped Kansas City shrug off the Houston Oilers, beat their 12-game winning streak in what was the largest football crowd in Astrodome history. The Chiefs beat the Oilers to get to the AFC title game against Buffalo. Montana was knocked out of the game, though. And of course, as I said in one of my previous videos, the presence of mind of Keith Cash, the tight end of Kansas City, to throw a ball at a Buddy Ryan poster. But yeah, Montana had a few good games with Kansas City. He still had some magic in him. And heck, he beat San Francisco with Steve Young when the Niners came to Kansas City. After that season, he retired. But the joke was on Montana because Steve Young actually thrived. Okay, he couldn't win the big one because Dallas beat him, but he finally got through in 95 and beat the San Diego Chargers 49-26. And finally, he asked his teammates to take the monkey off his back. And I think it was Harris Barden who was the tackle, who was the guy who did that, who ripped the monkey off Steve Young's back. And it worked. It all worked out in the end, I suppose. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.